But alhamdulillah, I once again like to thank everyone for coming out on time. It's a nice treat for a change. Of course, our community is accustomed to something different, and so alhamdulillah, maybe you are the game changers. The game changers are here tonight. So it takes me great pleasure and honor to be here in Philadelphia, the city of my birth, and also here at the Kuba Institute, Kuba Masjid, which is also the home place where I like to say is the place where I got my the formation of my intellectual formation begun here at this particular masjid, going back to the founder, well, not so much the founder, but of course, the father of our imams, Sheikh Anwar Muhammad and his brother Anas, their father, Sheikh Nafi. May Allah have mercy on him. And so of course, is every time I come to the city, I'm always love to see old faces and feel the love naturally from those faces. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve all of you and protect you and increase you, and may He improve the condition of the Muslims in this city and the Muslims in this nation. That said, today, as Brother Khalil highlighted, we want to speak about this book, which is before us, entitled The Negro in Arab Muslim Consciousness. Now, this book grew out of my doctoral dissertation, which originally was called The Negro in Afro-Arabian Muslim Consciousness. The title changed largely because it had become evident to me that I spent more time speaking about the view of the Negro in Arab consciousness rather than what we call Afro-Arabian consciousness. And so in the way that I was thinking of the Afro-Arabian was a combination of the individual who originates from the Arabian Peninsula, and also those who perhaps were born even with a tenuous connection to the continent, but born and raised in Africa, in the African continent, would still identify as being Arabs, or themselves started to identify as being Arabs at a certain point, and how they reacted to certain hadith which berated blacks, or particular policies that were promoted among certain mainstream Maliki scholars, and even has its roots in the Maliki school itself, going back some centuries. So it evolved out of that, and originally my concern was it was connected with the topic of marriage and guardianship, and that as a student of the Maliki school, as I delved into the commentaries on one particular policy related to different types of women, which are divided into, we call it Sharifa and Diniya, which is, we can translate respectively as the noble and the ignoble woman, that under the category of the ignoble woman was, I found scholars saying that it was black women. And naturally, I was troubled by it because it seemed to promote a different type of policy, which actually left black women vulnerable to the exploits of certain men, because fundamentally what the idea was that since this black woman, among certain other types of women as well, that they were deemed to be undesirables, that they were considered to be fit for marriage to any man. And for this reason, they can choose whoever they wanted to be their guardians in order to marry them off, even in the presence of a relative, guardian. So if a father objects, but then an individual is not, if a father decides, well, forget about your father, I'll be your guardian. And if the marriage occurs, then these scholars were validating that particular policy in the school. Because they'll say, well, this is a woman, she's not desirable to begin with, so she's kuf, she's compatible with any particular woman. I mean, with any particular man, of course. I mean, sorry. You know, she's compatible with any particular man. So naturally troubled because of the associations between blackness and the world from which we all come, or the idea when you see black and you automatically you react based upon your own perceptions of what that means. I wanted to try to understand like why Muslim scholars might actually consider such a policy to be fair, right? To be a fair policy. So as I delved deeper into the issue, it led me to the study of race in general, right? And race constructs and how ideas about race have evolved throughout history. And ultimately, what I did find was that in spite of the fact that race differs, even still today in many parts of the world, and people's perceptions and conceptions of race differ in different parts of the world, that I saw something that looked like a transhistorical and perennial disdain for black skin and darker skin throughout human history. Now, it's not always the African that this is directed at, but it turns out that, and at least in a very ancient tradition, that a certain group of blacks were viewed as being the prototypical savage, I guess you would say, right? And I felt that I had discovered a link or the actual location of that particular group of people in East Africa, which in Arabic referred to as the Zanj. And so one particular book of history, an Arab history book, which described the Zanj, and well, actually multiple, Mas'udi mentions it as well. The Zanj people, and even Ibn Khaldun makes, and alludes to them, and calls a group of people the Limnan people. And these are people who are described as being completely naked. They were cannibals. They were war or bellicose people, that they loved warfare as well. You know, so they're constantly antagonistic, in a sense, sort of like appear to be people operating on somewhat like the reptilian brain type of that level. You know, in spite of their sort of bellicose nature, that often they would lose wars too, and then would make slaves of others as well. So fundamentally, what it had awakened within me was the realization that from most of our history, even in the continent of Africa, Africans themselves didn't see themselves as a homogeneous race, right? And other people didn't see themselves as a homogeneous race. And so which led me to, again, after a lot of research, to conclude that most of the time, if not all of the times, that you find references to, or negative references to blacks in the Hadith literature, and then even certain writings from other religious traditions, that they are not talking about all people that we ourselves would consider to be black people. They were talking about a particular type of black person. And I just believe that the original connotation of the term Negro, even in the English language, was a very negative connotation. Or as one scholar put it, the only difference between a nigger and a Negro was that the former was a slave and the latter was free, right? But both deemed to be a derogatory term referred to people. Now, of course, we know our history, and over time, the blacks in America, they embraced this term and didn't see it, they transformed it into a different type of word, or a positive word, and identified with it. You know, 'cause there was a time you can call a person a Negro, but you couldn't call them black. Right? People get upset, you call them black. No, I'm not black, you know, I'm a Negro. But Negro means black. But it was embraced by many of our predecessors in our particular context.